Hello, folks. Welcome to Inside the Marble Palace, Post Media Saskatchewan's podcast. I'm Murray Mandrick, political columnist for the Regina Leader Post, and with me, as usual, is Arthur White-Crummey, our legislative reporter. Special guest this week, my good friend Adam Hunter, legislative reporter for CBC Saskatchewan. Lots to talk about with yesterday's announcement. Fourth one, guys? Is this the fourth time we've had new regs on 19 and what we're not supposed to do and supposed to do? I think
it's hard
so.
to even remember anymore. They've been changing so quickly.
Well, let's start with what's different today, Arthur. What did they do that people are going to need to know about?
Well, it seems like there's only one thing that they actually went ahead and more or less banned, and that's sports activities. So now team sports activities are suspended, they say, until December 17th for kids and for adults. You can still practice. You can still do the training activities so long as you're a kid, and there's 8 or fewer of you. And then also some more restrictions that we saw towards businesses. The one very new thing is capacity limits for large businesses. So that's those that have a floor area of, I believe, was 20,000 square feet or so, if somebody wants to correct me on that. They are limited to 50% capacity, or also there's a ratio for the sort of number of people that can be there at one time, depending on the floor area. Also, we did hear some things about restaurants. So there's a more distancing requirements. It's now 3 meters instead of 2 meters, unless you have barriers, and 4 people at once instead of 6. They also dropped the ceiling for weddings and worship services down from I believe it was 150 with certain other restrictions. It's now down to 30. So that's a major drop, but still a pretty high limit. And those seem to be some of the highlights. Adam was there as well, so if he wants to add anything that I might have missed, feel free to.
I'm mostly wondering, Adam, if you thought they were going to go this far, or whether the reaction is that they didn't go far enough. I'm getting a bit of both. And I'm intrigued by that, because usually when you get a little bit of both, government has hit a sweet spot. I'm not so sure that they have, but I think they're closer. What's your sense?
I think we all watched Alberta's announcement the day before and thought that could be a preview of what Saskatchewan announced. As a couple of weeks ago, Alberta announced a bar curfew, and then the next day, Saskatchewan announced the same thing. The two provinces are really an interesting comparison when you look at what's allowed and what's not allowed. For example, in Saskatchewan, you can still run a nightclub and have a nightclub, have people in there. Now there's a limit, but in Alberta, those have been banned since March. In Alberta, the gathering limits are higher. They have banned team sports a couple of weeks ago. Saskatchewan didn't do that until recently, as you mentioned. I think that the one thing that I think maybe surprised me is that the gathering limits, well, as Arthur mentioned, went from 150 to 30 in, say, like a worship service or a casino, a performance venue. They also split up where you can serve food and drink inside a performance venue, because previously you could go to a concert, take your mask off, watch the concert, eat and drink. That sort of went against some of the public health guidance that we've heard. So again, Premier Moe yesterday saying, this is still about personal responsibility. If people follow these guidelines and continue to do what they're going to do, then this should work better. But he did admit, and so did Dr. Shahab, that their previous measures, which we've seen, things like the mask mandate for just Regina, Saskatoon, Prince Albert, the bar curfew, the gathering limit, that these haven't had the impact they'd wanted. And we're seeing cases rising, in hockey teams. We're seeing cases rising. We had a case in a curling rink. We have a lot of long-term care outbreaks. Schools have been affected. We almost get, 2 or 3 schools a day in Regina or Saskatoon announcing that a classroom's been closed. So I think things weren't improving the way they wanted to see them. And I think, maybe a little surprised by how far they went. But as you say, Murray, there are people that wanted more restrictions. They wanted bars shut down. They wanted, things restricted. And that's not going to happen. And I don't think people should really expect that from this government. Scott Moe said that he doesn't want a lockdown. He doesn't even want a circuit breaker, which would be 3 weeks, which is what the NDP is asking for. So I think people have to get used to the fact that we're going to see these incremental changes every week or so, responding to where they see outbreaks and where they see cases.
It's interesting to me because in regard to how it contrasts with Alberta, I thought it contrasted a fair bit in tone. He wasn't for, and I thought it contrasted a fair bit with the previous three announcements they made, because this one seemed a little bit more science-based, and you started to touch on that, Adam. So maybe we'll add a little bit more of a conversation with you in terms of what they did. What I found interesting, and I asked them why they didn't go harder on schools, and they're not seeing, and their response is, well, we're just not seeing outbreaks in schools beyond individual cases that might have been brought in by a student in the school and then confined to that one student in the school. They said there's been 186 schools affected, which was kind of shocking to me. But of that number, I think only 78 or so in multiple students. And those multiple students, what Dr. Schwab said yesterday afterwards, were usually cases, or quite often cases, coming in from hockey and other sporting events. He said that of the outbreaks, the 25 outbreaks that they've kind of had, multiple outbreaks since start of November, I think he said 10 of the 25 have been from hockey. And I know how precious hockey is to parents and certainly to the Moe government. And this gets right to their very core and very base. You're talking about the Nipawin Hawks, the Kindersley Clippers, Estevan, Weyburn, Melford, Melville, Yorkton, all these teams who have senior hockey league teams are affected by this. So one thing that I thought was really fascinating and different is that he wasn't just talking to appease those he usually wants to talk to. He was talking to people that might be a little bit annoyed with him and might normally wholeheartedly support everything he did. I found that to be the most fascinating difference between this particular announcement and other ones.
I think you raise a number of good points there, Marie. I think the other one that we didn't touch on that I think is a difference, and it's also where maybe they're seeing outbreaks and cases in workplaces. So they have mandated masks now in workplaces, and it's not just restricted to common areas where the public is going to be. That was the previous mandate. This is expanded because we've seen outbreaks in workplaces and factories, things like that. Evraz and Regina, we had Brantford, Saskatoon, of food processing plants have had outbreaks. So that's one change. Other one is making a mask mandatory for all daycare. So kids, under 2 don't have to wear a mask, but everyone over that, parents, staff, visitors, that's changed. And those are both changes. We've gone from only having mask mandatory in 3 cities to now a very widespread mask mandate. And another comparison to Alberta, where they don't have a mask mandate there. It exists in Calgary and Edmonton, but not elsewhere in the province unless it's been put in place in certain sectors. So that's another big difference. And I think you touched on it, Marie. They're always going to upset people if they went to start shutting down curling and hockey. And also I want to mention dance. There's thousands of kids in the province and parents that are affected by that change. And this is a 3-week suspension. So they're not shutting it down. They're not saying January 1st. Alberta did another thing where they moved schools to online, grades 7 to 12, and they extended the Christmas break. We didn't see that in Saskatchewan. There was some criticism from boards in Alberta that didn't get a heads up on this, and that we haven't seen sort of the feedback other than from some of the hockey groups and some of the sporting groups, parents and otherwise, to really criticize the government on some of their targeted shutdowns or closures in these restrictions in these different sectors, maybe because they took an extra day or a week to discuss it, like they told us they were going to do last week. They said that they were going to consult, and they may have given a little more of a heads up to these groups.
I don't think you can ever get the politics. I'm going to ask you about this, Arthur, because it's kind of up your alley, something you love to talk about. Politics in it, how do you ever remove it? And it's fascinating to me because this is about as close as I think Scott Moe and the Sask Party government are going to go when they're talking about restricting businesses, as Adam says, with masks and with large scale limitations in terms of customers. Although I think that affects more chains and big box stores than it probably does your mom and pop business that they're looking for support on these policies. what I absolutely fascinated though by is that he can't get through a bloody press conference without a gratuitous shot at Trudeau. And there was another one, and I'm not 100% sure it was completely inappropriate, because the issue in play is the vaccinations and what's being said about the availabilities. But Arthur, what was said in that comment, and why do you think, given the relations with the federal government that we've seen with the Sask Party government, why do you think it was said in terms of the comment related to vaccines and Trudeau's slow play of that particular issue?
Well, I just want to start by actually noting that you're absolutely right about the sort of distinction between big box stores and kind of smaller businesses. And I think they have avoided a major pitfall that we saw in a few other provinces.
Manitoba in particular.
Manitoba, even Ontario, where there were problems where it seemed as though small businesses were being treated unfairly because subject to stricter restrictions than some of these foreign-owned big box stores. The Moe government has stayed completely away from that. The new restrictions only concern those with large floor areas. So that was at least smart. They learned from the mistakes made next door, and they stayed away from making that same mistake. As for what you raised about the Trudeau comment, I mean, I think that's a major weak spot for the Trudeau government, how they failed to prepare for this, how they failed to invest the money that they would need to do to build manufacturing capacity, or, sort of license some of these vaccines like other countries have been doing, I think is going to come back to bite them in the months ahead. Every day that Americans are getting vaccinated, Germans are getting vaccinated, Spaniards are getting vaccinated, and Canadians aren't, is going to be the worst day for the Trudeau government, as one person mentioned to me. And I think Moe sees that. He sees an opportunity to change the conversation to his preferred ground of federal-provincial relations, which is always profitable for him. And it worked. That's now our number one performing story on the website. So people are obviously very, very interested in that dispute and are ignoring perhaps some of the other things that were raised during the press conference.
Well, maybe that's what it was all about. Yeah, I'm not saying Moe is wrong, and I think you're dead right, Arthur. Like, this is a failure on the federal government part, and the whole notion of it's somehow Mulroney's fault or Harper's fault going back 3 decades or going back even 5 years that we didn't get something in place in terms of the production of vaccines federally. Seems to be a weak tea argument from a government that's been in power with a majority government for 4 of those 5 years. So I don't really necessarily think that Moe is wrong. I don't know strategically if it was terribly helpful when you need a buy-in from everybody in the province, and you throw out this notion that somehow what I really want to also be talking about today is Trudeau and the problems that Trudeau has created for me when I'm actually imposing a lot of other things that people aren't going to like. Maybe it was just a nod to the public out there that, hey, I'm still on your side on this particular issue. I still am doing things from a Saskatchewan first standpoint, but a lot of those things are stuff that you don't like. So I'm going to mention Trudeau. He's a Habs fan anyway. Why would I not?
Well, that's
an unforgivable thing.
As you said, Murray, this was one of the rare occasions where we actually saw Moe, bringing forward a new measure that would lead to some alienation among the base. And there's nothing the base loves more than a little bit of red meat thrown to them in terms of a dispute with the prime minister. So certainly that's something that could distract attention and can maybe take some of the pain away and place it elsewhere. Hey, if these measures drag on, it's who to blame. It's the person who's not getting you your vaccine.
Is it smart politics, Adam? Is it or is it something that when you're trying to sell to other people, they're going to shake their head and say, "Here goes Moe again. So why should I listen to a damn thing he's saying otherwise that I need to if this is going to be all about federal liberal bashing?"
I think the criticism I've seen of him mentioning that yesterday is that Saskatchewan has its own problems right now, and the problems are people in hospital and people who won't be getting a vaccine anytime soon, who are dealing with COVID-19, and preventing the spread of the virus. And maybe is the Saskatchewan government doing enough? Are we spending enough money? Yesterday he was asked about helping businesses out that may be affected by these restrictions, and he didn't go far to say, yeah, we're going to do this. So he said we'd look into it, and there could be something on the way. But those are sort of the pressing concerns. I don't know if the vaccine and where the vaccine's being manufactured and we're going to get it in a couple of months is the most pertinent thing. I know it was in the House of Commons. The Conservative Party raised it. It was in the newspapers. So obviously it was going to come up. I think, Scott Moe, as you mentioned, saw an opportunity there. But the other thing that we have to remember is that people have to be confident in a vaccine. You have to have public confidence that you're going to have enough people take it. So the government can say there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're going to get a vaccine and it's going to get here and we're going to have it in early January or February, hopefully, for seniors and healthcare workers, as Paul Merriman said last week. But if you don't have buy-in from a vast majority of the population taking this vaccine, it defeats its purpose. So casting any doubt over the vaccine, even if it's about the manufacturing of the vaccine, you have to be very clear with the public that this is something we're still going to trust when it comes out, that it's tested. I know that the trials of, the vaccines have come out, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine. These are huge swaths of people that they're testing versus other things, other vaccines that are tested, and it's been done so fast that there are going to be skeptics, there are going to be people that are anti-vax, that are out there that are saying, I don't trust this. I'm not going to take it. I saw, recent polls are suggesting that, some people in Canada aren't going to take the vaccine when it comes out. So that's the direction I think that, people will want to see the Premier pushing in, that there's confidence in the vaccine once we've established that we're going to get it. And as Arthur mentioned, I think, it is a problem for the federal government that other countries were going to get the vaccine sooner than Canada because they can manufacture it at home. And that is a major problem for the federal government. They'll have to fix that. I'm sure they're going to be working on it. And the criticism of that is going to continue because it is the most pressing thing. But we do have issues of course, the spreading virus in Saskatchewan, the rapidly and growing number of hospitalizations, people in ICU, which seems to be steady right now, but we haven't seen the impact of these the most recent spike in cases on the hospitalizations. Of course, there's a lag. We expect that to be in a couple of weeks. And, we're seeing, obviously, Francis Sackamou's death this week. I think it hit a lot of people because a lot of people won't know someone that has been affected by COVID-19 because of the numbers, or someone who's died. And I think that's another thing that's maybe hitting people a little bit harder is, we know someone who's an Indigenous hockey hero who's passed away and lost their life due to COVID-19. So a lot of issues at home still that we need to work out.
Well, if I could just chime into that for 1 second. I think that the vaccine issue is kind of intimately connected to these more pressing concerns that you raised, Adam, because I think that having clarity about when we're going to get a vaccine, especially if we know that it's going to be in the short term, makes it much easier to convince people to follow these measures because they know that they're temporary. They can see the light at the end of the tunnel, like you said, and the PM being unable to give any precise date and being unable to give clarity about why we're behind some of these other countries in the line, I think makes it more difficult for the province to sell the harsh measures that they may need to if cases continue to rise. So I think that they're part and parcel of the same thing.
Does it make it harder, or could it possibly make it easier, basically saying that because we're being failed by the federal government at this particular point, we need to do our part to reduce this without, as Sask Party and Scott Moe always stress, without shutting down the economy totally? And I'm kind of wondering about it in the sense of something that I'd like to get into before we leave this. It's gone by pretty quickly, but the daily numbers, we almost live and die by those daily numbers ourselves. Sorry for the inappropriate suggestion there, but on the weekend when we were surpassing Manitoba with 400 cases, had there been yesterday's announcement at that particular time, as opposed to 3 days later when the rolling average is more in the high 180s, 160s, below the average of 200 cases a day, I think that's actually changed the dialogue slightly, and it might have even changed the nature of yesterday's announcement in the sense that if we were facing Manitoba's numbers, I don't think they could have got away with quite the same thing that they did yesterday. I think there'd be a more pronounced demand for them to hit it. But are we living and breathing by these daily numbers, particularly as it relates to deaths and hospitalizations? How is that going to change the dialogue in terms of Moe moving forward? I guess I'll start with you, Arthur, and finish up with Adam.
Well, it seems like now we're living by the 7-day average. That's what Shahab is mentioning more than anything else. He's given us rough targets about where he wants the province to be, though those seem to have changed to some degree. 60, 120, 200, more than 120, it seems. We need to continue to implement new measures until the case numbers get down below that level. But you're right. I think that if we had have continued to shoot up and we're consistently at 400 cases a day or 500 cases a day, it would have been a different conversation. Yesterday, Dr. Shahab was able to say these measures appear to be having some impact. The rate of increase does seem to be slowing down. We seem to be stabilizing, though the cases certainly aren't where we need them to be. So, I mean, it helped them to sell new restrictions as something that we need to do without really forcing people to be in a panic that we were going to continue to have exponential growth.
And you asked a question yesterday, Adam, and I don't think you got an answer to it actually, but you asked what number it would be that would cause them to change policies, whether it was either hospitalizations or deaths or just even daily caseloads. Even though you didn't get an answer, are you getting a sense in terms of where their head's at, in terms of what numbers make them move in terms of policy change?
I think you have to listen to Scott Moe. He said for a few weeks now during the election campaign before there won't be another lockdown. He's been adamant about it. And yesterday he said that again. So if people are expecting that or wanting that, it's not going to happen. I would be shocked. I think we'd have to see something catastrophic as far as the numbers go. And I'm trying to get a sense of what that would be. And I've asked that for 2 straight weeks now. What is our threshold? What is our, break glass in case of emergency button, and we aren't getting a sense of that. I think there is a sense from this government that we're not going to go to we're stamping this out. We're going to go into a lockdown and do what Melbourne, Australia, or other places have done. I think we have to get used to the fact that they're going to put in these measures week by week to try and target where they think the cases are coming from. The big key here that everyone needs to remember is if we aren't contact tracing and we lose control of that, as Alberta has, we won't know where those cases are coming from, and they won't be able to put in targeted measures or back those up with any statistics and say, here's the science behind why we're shutting this next thing down, or we're extending these restrictions. So that has to be something that's important. And I know in the last couple of days, and you guys put a great video up of this, Saskatoon and Regina have been just bombarded with testing. There's been hour-long waits, multiple hour-long waits for the Regina drive-through testing site. That could be because there's cases in schools and hockey teams, and parents are going, okay, maybe my kid was a contact, I'm going to go take them for a test. Or it could be because people are not feeling well, and we're starting to see a little bit of a bump. I don't know. But the thing that Saskatchewan has really avoided that other provinces haven't is cases in nursing homes. Cases in nursing homes have caused huge spikes of deaths in Alberta, in Manitoba, in Ontario, Quebec, and BC. Saskatchewan hasn't seen that. We've avoided that. Now we're starting to see cases and outbreaks in homes. I'm encouraged that the government is sharing those numbers with us, and we know where these care homes are affected. But the fact of this virus and what we've seen across the world is when this gets into long-term care and into the elderly population, it is devastating. So that is something that I think, as far as the numbers go, and if Saskatchewan can do a great job of keeping those numbers low and trying to cut off some of those chains of transmission within the care homes, like I think they're doing with the visitation rights, then that will help keep the numbers low. And as Shahab and Moe said yesterday, these restrictions go into effect until the 17th. They're leaving a little bit of light, a door open to say maybe Christmas, you could have 10 people in your house. And Shahab mentioned that they could maybe do some changes to the restrictions, but that will depend on the numbers. And it's going to be very tight based on what we know about how this virus transmits and the 2-week lag to see if we can hit that. But they're really wanting the public again to buy in and do their part.
Well, unfortunately, I could talk about this all day, but unfortunately, we have our time limit. So this is great. Thanks, guys. I guess we'll be back soon to talk about this again. So thanks for tuning in folks, and look for future podcast episodes. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Maria.